Hey everybody, how's it going? I don't know if anybody's here yet, but we're just gonna wait a few minutes to start. Bop, ba, bop, bop, bop. Yeah, 3 people. Mitch Hosking, hola. Hey, how you doing, Mitch? Great to see you. First one here, or first one speaking. And there's Trevor. Hey, Trevor. Hey, Guy. Hey, buddy. How's it going? Hope you guys are doing well. We're just going to get started formally in just a couple minutes. Brianna will be joining at some point tonight, but our son is took a long nap today, so he's got a later bedtime. He's looking at me right now. Hi, Demetrios. Hi. And so because of that, she might be over a little bit later, but she will be stopping by at some point. So at least for now, we'll be doing it where I just try to take your questions off the screen. Hey, Connor, how's it going? Great to see you. Great to see you. 6 people here, 7 people here. It's not too bad. Not too bad. Just heading over to film a marketing video for our local NDP candidate. Fantastic. Somebody asked, what did Trudeau do now? Northwind asks, howdy from Alberta. Lisa says, hello. Hey, Lisa, great to see you again. I just want to say that Lisa left a fantastic comment on one of the videos today, talking about how her experience as a dentist working in the North was very different from like the private practice dentists. And I thought it was really insightful. So I don't know if you can go to my video about dental care that I posted today, look for Lisa's comment. I actually think Lisa should write an article about that. Trying to talk about how, you know, a public dental care system would be better for patients and better for dentists as well, for quality of life. You know, maybe, I don't know. I don't want to speak for Lisa, but maybe the money isn't as good, but maybe the quality of life is much better. And you know, that could be something great to see. Sorry to go off track there, but I just thought it was fantastic. Adam B says, hi, what's up, Solidarity? So about what Trudeau did, I want to get into that a little bit. And I also want to say that after this, I'll probably make a video dedicated to that. And I'll probably try to put that up as soon as I can, either very late tonight or like sometime after midnight. It's going to be a thing I do as soon as this goes up. Justin Trudeau, about 18 or so years ago, when he was young, but not very young, he was about 29, 30, 31, did brownface, took an Arabian Nights themed, you know, party and wore the turban and dressed up like a stereotypical Arabian prince / genie, what have you. But he darkened his skin, his face and his hands and the whole deal. And, you know, it was really bad. And it is real. This is from Time Magazine. The government has acknowledged it. Like the Liberals have said, you know, this is not a fake news thing. This is real. And it's very troubling to me. It's very troubling. And Jagmeet Singh has commented, and Singh, I think, was, if anything, far too kind. I think it shows the depth of patience that Jagmeet Singh has, which I do not have, which is the, you know, Singh basically said, you know, Trudeau needs to realize how this hurts people, and that given especially that he's prime minister, how these actions, even you know, a generation later, hurt people. They mock people. They mock entire segments of our country. They mock in the faiths and ways of life of millions of Canadians, and it was unacceptable. And I think Justin Trudeau at the very least needs to apologize. And what I'm actually very interested in is, you know, what will Liberals do? Will Liberals hold their party to account? Or will they underpin and try to support their prime minister's racist action, you know, because he's on our team? And people will say, well, 2001 is a long time ago. And it is, but it's only 4 years earlier than when Andrew Scheer said some awful stuff about gay marriage in 2005. And we still talk about that, and rightfully so. Those views still matter. Justin Trudeau's actions at that 2001 party still matter. To me, they're largely equivalent. They're largely equivalent. They're both very troubling. And so this is the big news right now. We won't just talk about that, but that's the big news right now. And I think it's awful. And I think that we really have to question Justin Trudeau's commitment to equality. We have to question his commitment to this idea that he treats all people equally. I don't think that I have any confidence that in our prime minister's sense of racial justice, at least not anymore. Look, I never liked Trudeau. But the reality is that, like, I didn't think he was a racist. I didn't. I really didn't. I thought he was colonialist and how he treated indigenous people, both people like Jody Wilson-Raybould, but also generally. But I didn't think he would do something like this. I didn't. This isn't that long ago. We knew this was bad back then. We did. Like, we knew this was bad. And Trudeau's not a 14-year-old here. Like, we knew this. None of the other people in the picture are wearing brownface. He's the only one doing it, right? Like, you know, that's the reality, right? I don't know. It's bad. It's bad. Really bad. Scrub says this gonna be good. Look, Scrub, honestly, in the depth of my heart, I get it. I get some people are like, this might take down Trudeau. What are the effects gonna be? And honestly, those are important discussions, and I'm not trying to shy away from those. But I gotta be honest that, like, it really isn't about that. It's about the fact that our prime minister did something so harmful and so degrading to millions of Canadians that really matters tonight. And, like, whether this hurts him in the polls or whether liberals are like, it doesn't matter, we're allowed to be racist as long as it's not Andrew Scheer, like, which some liberals will do, I guarantee you. What matters tonight is what Jagmeet Singh said, which is that it's not about this election. It's about a prime minister who hurt so many people. And he said, like, the people in this room, myself and many others, have felt the sting of what they're feeling right now when they see what the prime minister did. That's what it's about, right? Is this going to hurt Trudeau? I don't know. It should. It should hurt Trudeau in the polls, but I can't make that prediction yet. I can't. Yeah, Travis, you say 19 years ago, but Scheer's remarks were 15 years ago. And you'll say, well, Scheer was in Parliament. But Justin Trudeau is older than Andrew Scheer. They were both adults. And Justin Trudeau was not just a guy, he was a school teacher. This person taught children. We hold teachers, and rightfully so, to a higher moral standard than the average person. In some ways, we hold teachers to a higher moral standard than we do members of Parliament. Right? So I don't buy this 19 years ago BS. No, this is really bad. This is really bad. Travis is only wrong if it meant to be wrong. No. It's wronger if it was meant to be wrong, but it can still be wrong even if unintentional. Intent matters, but it's not everything. Intent is not everything. At some point, like, the racial ignorance is not an excuse. It's an indictment. Zane, you say Trudeau is definitely not racist, man. I don't know. Maybe he isn't anymore. Maybe he learned from this, but I never saw Trudeau apologize for this. I never saw him say, look, something happened 15 years ago, and I'm very ashamed about it. And I want to let you people know that what I did was wrong, and I'm going to own up to it. Trudeau never did that. And you know why? Because either he doesn't feel sorry about it, or because he knew it would hurt him, or both. Zane, I'm going to say this with all due respect. Fuck off with that bullshit. This idea, this idea that we have to excuse racism to protect Justin Trudeau from Andrew Scheer, I'm done with it. I'm done with that. If we lose this election because Justin Trudeau lied about electoral reform and then did brownface and then lied to Indigenous people and then all of the other promises that he broke, and then you try to go and blame me and the NDP or whoever for it, like, I'm sorry, but, like, it's Justin Trudeau's fault, and he will be the one who I'll blame, and he will be the one who should get blamed. It's not my fault, and it's not even Andrew Scheer's fault that Justin Trudeau did brownface. It's not. There are no photos of Andrew Scheer who did brownface. Let's be real, people. Let's be real. Scheer has a better record now on this than Trudeau. That is fact. I don't care. I don't care about this whole, we gotta excuse race. This is what Trudeau did, is what those Republican governors did down in the States, and or Democrats had to do down in the States, and Republicans, and they resigned for it. This is really not that different. This is really not that different. It's not, right? Like, it's not that different, you know? Like, it's really not. Like, I'm not putting up with this whole, like, you know, Trudeau, like, we got to protect him to protect Andrew Scheer. I can't deal with that. He just apologized. That's great to see. That's great to see. Hopefully we can learn from that. And here's the thing. I'm not really the one who can forgive him. There are other people who need to forgive him. And I will understand if they choose not to. I will understand if they do not accept his apology. Maybe they will, and I will understand if they do. But ultimately, you know, this is bad. This is bad. Look, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Like, just to explain to people, what is commonly referred to as blackface or brownface or what have you is the general trend where you will use some kind of cosmetic material or whatnot to darken your skin. It has terrible roots, largely in before and after, you know, the end of slavery in the United States, where often for white audiences, you know, it's segregated audiences, what have you. White men would wear darkened skin color and make fun of black people. And cartoons did this, and this went on well into the 1900s. And brownface is sort of like that in that you're darkening your skin to look quote unquote Indian or quote unquote Arabic or whatever. And in so doing, you're trying to mock another person's race. And it's unacceptable and it's wrong. And Trudeau should have known better. And that's the controversy here. Like honestly, the people who are defending it, you guys are enabling white supremacy. It is what it is. It honestly, if Andrew Scheer did this, I guarantee you all the people who are mad about it would still be mad, and rightfully so. But then everyone who's like, it's not a big deal. I saw some people say, oh, it was a fictional character. And so because it's a fictional character, it doesn't count. He wasn't mocking a real person. Well, let me tell you this. What if somebody tried to do this with Barack Obama or with a fictional African-American character? I guarantee you, if it was in 2001 or 1991 or even in 1981, we would be like, look, we got to end the man's career tonight. If Joe Biden comes out in blackface in 1981, he is done. So Justin Trudeau doing something similar in 2001, man, I don't know. I don't know. So, like, you look, that's where I am on this, right? Justin Trudeau did something really bad. It's good he apologized. It's good that the Liberals didn't try to make this a fake news issue. I saw some Liberal supporters do that on Twitter. I'm glad he's owned up to it. Is this something that is going to hurt him? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think it's going to help him, but it might hurt him. Is this apology good enough? And again, I don't know. I'm not really the one he's apologizing to. There are millions of other Canadians that are affected by this. I'm not one of them, not in a direct sense. And so I can't answer for them. But I think this is really bad. And again, for instance, like I stood, like when I critiqued Elizabeth May, you know, on the whole, you know, taking NDP members and some of them suggesting that they left the NDP because of Jagmeet Singh's race and religion. And I said, like, look, I'm critical of Trudeau, but the Liberals have never sounded like this. This is like a Green Party thing. But now I don't know. Now I don't know. This is really troubling. This is really troubling. Like, yeah. I mean, so Trudeau apologized. That's really good. I'm happy to see that. I don't know what the next path forward is. Jagmeet Singh has offered brief remarks. He might speak on it after Trudeau's formal remarks. Again, what Singh has said was, this is something that's hurt a lot of people. These actions, both historical and contemporary, serve to dehumanize and marginalize racialized Canadians who are different from the quote unquote majority. And look, I noted this on Twitter just before the stream yesterday, and my video that I put up this afternoon. Just yesterday, the CTV asked a question: is Canada ready for a prime minister who wears a turban? And today we see this, right? I think we're asking the wrong questions. I think we are. I think we're asking some of the wrong questions here. So I don't want to dwell on this all night long. I also want to touch on the fact that Jagmeet Singh has had a great first week. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but he had a strong campaign launch. He had a strong first debate. Everywhere he's been going, he's been impressing people. He impressed people here in Kingston. He impressed people in Quebec when he visited. He impressed people in Oshawa, in Ottawa. Today he was in Barrie and he impressed people there. At the end of the day, he is doing fantastic. And I think he's building some real momentum. I mean, there was a report today from Quebec that said, let's rank all the campaign launches. And the NDP was ranked first by the Quebec press in terms of the quality of their first week. Second to the Bloc, with the Liberals, Greens, and Conservatives being further down the list. Hare asks a good question about the Maxime Bernier thing. And as I noted in my video, it's very interesting. The commission basically said that you had to prove 3 criteria. 1, run in pretty much all the ridings. They were going to do that. 2, have won a seat before. They couldn't have done that. They're a new party. And 3, demonstrate that you have a good chance of winning more than 1 seat. You had to do 2 of those 3 things. Now, the problem with that is that a decent chance wasn't defined. And so when they did some polling, they found that 24% of people in some ridings would consider or better voting for the PPC. And so there's a riding, for instance, where 24% of people would consider, not are planning to, vote for the PPC, and that still puts them in third in the riding. I actually think the commission was too generous to the PPC. I don't think they passed the threshold of demonstrating broad electability. For instance, I would have liked to see 2 polls where they're polling in ridings first, or how many ridings are they polling second in, or how many ridings are they within the margin of error of victory on. Like, that's what I wanted to see, and we saw none of that. The only riding I think they have a realistic chance of winning is Bernier's riding, and that's not a guarantee. Like, no, Chad, ignoring the PPC won't make them go away. That's a fair point. And my view was like, you don't exclude them based on ideology. You exclude them based on the actual criteria. And I just don't think they met it. They were originally excluded because they didn't meet the criteria. And I still think the criteria was too liberally applied. Right? It was too liberally applied. And because of that, I feel like maybe they didn't want to look like they were biased, and in so doing, they were sort of biased. Because let's be real, Elizabeth May, like her or not, got excluded from debates in previous elections, and I think her party had a much better claim to be in the debates than Bernier's. Lisa said, Krista, I love your butter tart tweet regarding Jagmeet Singh. Thanks so much. I was particularly proud of that one. If you didn't see it, Jagmeet was like looking at a box of butter tarts very longingly. And I said, like, find someone who loves you or looks at you like Jagmeet Singh looks at this box of butter tarts. And it did somewhat go viral, which is always nice to see. I think you got to have fun on these elections. Honestly, there are days like today, guys, where the prime minister does something awful, or like a tragedy happens, or like it's all ticking, and like those are important days and you got to cover them. But then it's nice every once in a while to have these moments of levity, and I think Singh has done that really well, whether it's the butter tart incident or whether it's him, with the hammer at the fair when he hit the bell twice in a row. Like those sorts of things are really great to see, right? Chad, I think you make a good point there, like Trump being excluded. But here's the thing, Trump was never excluded. Trump was given wall-to-wall media coverage. And if you listen to the guy who was like heading up CNN, at least at the time where Trump was on the rise, he says he regrets how much screen time they gave Donald. They gave him far too much screen time, and he feels that might have given him an overinflated sense of support that gave him momentum carrying him through. Now, the problem with that was in that they gave him coverage. It was uncritical. They would often just air an entire Trump rally without any interpretation. So Trump could just spout lies, as he's often does, and then there would be no correction, right? And now the media has gotten used to that, and now they're correcting Trump. They'll say, as the president inaccurately stated, or the president told 5 lies today at the press conference. And I think like they weren't doing that. So yeah, to a degree, you're right. You can't just ignore things and make them go away, but sometimes you can. Sometimes that's possible. Like look at Milo Yiannopoulos. Who sees Milo Yiannopoulos anymore? He got deplatformed because he was awful, and now no one knows who he is. He didn't become a super pundit because we all ignored him. He got deplatformed, and now no one talks about Milo Yiannopoulos anymore. Deplatforming can work. It can. I'm not saying it does all the time, and it's always the solution, but it can work. Travis, you said polls are not accurate. Age, group, sample size all come into it. That's fair. One thing to know with polling is that you got to follow a couple things. You want to look at trends. So how does that poll compare to previous polls in the same by the company? You also want to look at historical trends, and you want to look at comparing polls to one another. These are why polling aggregators, although imperfect, they can have similar flaws to the polls themselves, can have some value because they help dull the effects of outliers. All of a sudden, let's say a poll has the conservatives at 52, and you're like, that doesn't sound right. And then the polling aggregators would be like, yeah, this is not in line with the rest of the data. You could make a case there that it's a bad poll. So polling can be improved by comparing over time and between pollsters. Lisa says, do you think the BC NDP candidates will pick up, lose, or maintain seats? I'm not sure. Right now, BC is the most volatile province. In terms of federal politics, and provincial even's a bit tricky right now too, but BC is incredibly volatile because at least at the federal level, it's the only province outside of Quebec that's truly a 4-party province. Like Newfoundland's got 3, Nova Scotia's got 3, New Brunswick's got 3, PEI's got 3, Quebec's got a bunch. The Greens in Ontario don't really compete federally. And then, in the West, some provinces are only 2-party provinces. Like, the reality is like, at the end of the day, BC is like the true 4-party province. The Greens, NDP, Liberals, and Conservatives could all win a good amount of seats there. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I do feel that if there is growth for the NDP, BC will likely be a target. Harry, you'd make a good point. It could split the Conservative vote. Andrew Scheer seemed to be the most against including Bernier, and I think that's why. I think he both doesn't want to give him space because he could take votes from the Conservatives' right wing. But also, I think he doesn't want to be associated with Bernier. Although maybe Scheer realizes there's an opportunity here that by denouncing Maxime Bernier's views, Scheer can come off as a moderate. And maybe Bernier, even unwittingly, could give Scheer more centrist legitimacy. Stephen Colbert, I don't know if you're the real Stephen Colbert. If you are, welcome, sir. Thank you so much for coming by. Maybe I assume that you're taking a break from your busy schedule. You ask a Green NDP merger. What do you think if we can't get electoral reform done? I actually did a video about this a few months ago. Just search through my channel, you'll see it. Because the people, McLean's article was done like a hypothetical about if they merged, they would form a pretty strong third party that would get somewhere in the mid-20s in the votes and would have the chance of winning seats where the NDP and Greens are already strong, but also maybe win some seats where only one of the two is strong. So, for instance, they would say that a Green NDP party would win more seats in the in suburban areas and in the Maritimes because the NDP and the Greens together add up to strength there. I don't know if it's going to happen because the ideologies are very different. The politics can be very different. And I don't know if the memberships would support it. Like, I wouldn't vote for it personally. I wouldn't vote for it. But I mean, like, who knows? 20 years from now, 15 years from now, maybe, but I just don't see it happening now. Omar asks, is Real Clear Politics accurate at polling? If so, don't we have to panic because Biden still has a lead in a wide margin? Omar, I'm not as versed on American aggregators and whatnot. I don't want to give a clear answer. I think even with aggregators, you want to look at multiple aggregators. Look at 538, Real Clear, other ones. You know, in Canada, we have the CBC Poll Tracker. We have Too Close to Call. We have 338. There's a whole bunch. I'm missing some probably. And so you want to look at the aggregators too. I don't want to give a clear comment. Yeah, Biden continuing to poll well in most polls is troubling to me. But again, people haven't started voting yet. And so I don't know if the average, even Democratic primary voter is really locked in yet. I don't know. It's not like in January, we could start talking about that stuff. Right now, I'm not sure. Chad, you're right that pretending he had no chance. I think that's fair. I think you're right that a lot of people were dismissing him. And I do think that probably hurt. But I wonder if the media coverage would have been more in line with what other people were getting. Then I don't know if Trump is president today. If Trump got what Bernie got early on, Trump wouldn't be president. But I agree with you. Part of the whole, the media elite being like, like Trump could never win. Like the politics is just too important to be sullied by a Donald Trump. Like, yeah, that narrative definitely did not help. I'm 100% with you there. Joshua says, hey, Christo, I saw Jagmeet in Montreal, could only stay for a bit, so I couldn't meet him, but he really looks like someone who's confident. I'm glad I saw the guy that I'm voting for in person. Yeah, I think Jagmeet really does have a good air. I don't think he's without charisma on screen, but he really ramps it up in person. He really does. He really does ramp it up in person. I think it's really something cool to see. It's really something special to see. 100%. I noticed it too. I never really met him in person. I'd seen him at a couple events. The first time I met him was here in Kingston, which you guys I talked about in the video. And yeah, you definitely notice his charisma. You definitely notice it. Lori Suiters, the NDP candidate, am I riding? Any thoughts on her? I'm not sure who she is, unfortunately. I'm sure she's great. I'm sure she's fantastic, but I'm not sure who she is, unfortunately. Apologies. Sorry, not the real Steven. Well, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, Mark Wilson, that's a great point. Bernier did not get 5% of the leadership vote and then cried and like took his ball and went home. He effectively tied Andrew Scheer. And let's be real. On the first ballot, more people backed Bernier than Scheer. So if you're looking at people's first choice in the Conservative Party, they wanted Bernier before Scheer. Scheer was the compromise pick. Scheer was the everyone's like fifth choice. But it worked for Scheer to win, and he might still be prime minister. But that's a very important point. Maxime Bernier almost won that party's leadership. So there are a lot of, there's a lot of conservatives who would be willing to support someone like Bernier, a lot of them. Now, here's the thing. I've noted this on streams and on videos. I think the only way Bernier's party could really grow is he needs to win his seat this time. He needs to keep the PPC brand alive. And then I think he needs a conservative government Because as long as the Liberals are in power, there will be a single-minded vision of defeating Trudeau. And I think this is what's preventing some right-wing conservatives from going over to Bernier. But if Scheer forms a government and starts discontenting right-wing conservatives because he won't implement some of the agenda because he knows it'll be political, a political, a bombshell. He'll feel like it'll destroy him politically. The reality is like some conservatives will be mad and leave. This is what happened. The Wild Rose Party grew out of discontent with a ruling conservative government in Alberta, and only upon an NDP government getting elected that they re-merge. And so I think that Bernier's opportunity is a Scheer government. That's the only way. I don't think it's going to happen otherwise. Atheist says, what do you think of the Greens plagiarizing part of their platform? Whew. Yeah, it's not great, is it? I mean, it was from an Indigenous group to boot. I mean, I don't want to comment too deeply because I'm not intimately knowledgeable on the issue, but it's not a good look. Like literally a settler Canadian party taking the intellectual work of an Indigenous group without their consent. The symbolism there is pretty rich, I have to say. But I mean, I don't know. I can't comment more than that. Trout, you say in rural rural Maritimes, the rural Maritimes have never been a strong suit for the NDP. I mean, there was Yvon Gaudin's seat in northern New Brunswick, but that was a bit of an exception. The NDP has always had strength in the Maritimes, in industrial areas and in urban areas. So yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but the reality is that like I don't know if there's like an alternative right now. Those seats will not go green though either. They will not go green though either. At the end of the day, they're either going to go liberal or conservative. The Greens, in the very best case, might take a seat like Moncton or Charlottetown. Or not Moncton, sorry, Fredericton or Charlottetown. But even that's unlikely. Mark Wilson says NDP needs to put things like nationalization of the energy industry on the table. I don't disagree. I think some of that is more at the provincial level. And Andrea Horwath and the Ontario NDP did talk about renationalizing hydro. And so I think that's important to note that resources are generally provincial in nature. And because of that, it's harder for a federal government to start nationalizing energy resources, although they could help provinces do so. I'm just going to quickly get a glass of water. I'll be right back, guys. Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. Okay. So I think that's a great opportunity to work with provinces to do so. But you're right. The NDP doesn't. So for instance, I think that Singh should be talking about nationalizing a telecom company in this election, not just lowering prices, but creating a public option. That's just me. I am on the left wing of the party. I still think we need to see that. Video Game Sophistry says, I know this guy. Video Game Sophistry, great channel, great video game channel. Different from other Let's Play channels. If you want, like, I think something a little bit more refined, but you like video game channels, but it's not going to be some guy screaming at you for 11 minutes, go check out that channel. It's fantastic. John says, what do you think about the weak state of the NDP in Atlantic Canada and New Brunswick specifically? I mean, it's not ideal. I'm from New Brunswick. I grew up in New Brunswick, lived there for basically the first 20 years of my life, 21 years of my life. So I'd like to see the NDP succeed there. But the NDP never really had much success in New Brunswick anyway, right? It's not like the NDP used to win a bunch of seats there. Provincially, we only really ever won seats under Elizabeth Weir. And federally, we only ever really won seats under Yvon Gaudin. And so was it Gaudin and Weir being very popular, or was it the party? And so it's always a question of, like, New Brunswick, it doesn't seem to be a fruitful area for the NDP. In the Atlantic Canada, it's really a mixed picture. There has been recent success for the NDP in Nova Scotia. We formed government there. But also, in Newfoundland, the Nova Scotia or the Newfoundland NDP had a surprise, good election result in this election this summer, and they're polling well above 20 for the first time in a long time. And so I would say that New Brunswick and PEI have never been strong for the NDP, unfortunate as it is. So it's not really a loss for the NDP. You know what I mean? And not to say that those provinces don't matter, but if the NDP all of a sudden started polling at 15% in New Brunswick, they still wouldn't win a seat. So at some point you have to ask, like, where are resources better allocated? Lisa, I get it. I totally do. But you will have a candidate, and they will be great. And, you can certainly count on casting a ballot for an NDP candidate. Mark, you asked a great question. What about amendments to the charter? That's a great one. I don't know if we'll see amendments to the charter because it's going to be very difficult to amend the charter. But I would agree. I think that we needed to see those things guaranteed. Basic human rights. And actually, some left-wing NDPers, like Sven Robinson, who was a young MP at the time, were speaking about these things. But even many NDPers didn't really talk about that a lot. I think there was an opportunity missed with the charter to make it more progressive. But if we ever do open it up again, I would like to see, right to a living wage, right to housing, right to a full education, pre-K to PhD. I want to see all of that included, 100%. 100%. It's a great point. I've written articles about that too. Ben says, what if Kevin O'Leary won? I mean, for a moment there, that wasn't impossible. It was looking like he might win, and people were like, the Trump comparisons were abounded. I never thought he was going to. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping he never was and tried to tell myself I was being analytical, but really I was just praying he wouldn't win. But the reality is he almost did. Like he was polling. And when he backed Bernier, I really thought Bernier was going to win. I really did, because Bernier was doing well. And then O'Leary was polling so well, and he backed Bernier. But yeah, like Kevin O'Leary almost became conservative leader. In an alternative universe, it might have happened. Which candidate in the upcoming Canadian federal election you feel is the best foreign policy? I mean, I still think it's the NDP, but I think that I'm sometimes critical of the NDP's foreign policy. I think we have to be more strident in supporting the global left. I think, like, for instance, it's good that we're the only party really criticizing Brazil, but we haven't really made a call to free Lula in the same way that Corbyn and Sanders have. So I think, like, we need to be more strident. But I like the fact that in our party, unlike the liberals and conservatives, at least, we actually have real debates. Like on Israel Palestine, the liberals and conservatives are just 100% pro-Israel, and like the NDP at least has a real debate in the party about it. No, I've said this before. I think Palestine is effectively being treated like Israel is an apartheid state, and that's my view. But in the NDP, that's at least a debate. In the liberals and conservatives, it isn't. But I mean, I still think there are times I've been very critical of NDP foreign policy. No, Stephen, you're right, and it was somewhat similar. I mean, Ford won it in a very close race. Both the federal conservatives and Ontario conservative leadership race were razor thin. If you guys remember, we had to wait a few hours to found out who won the conservative nomination leadership race, because they didn't know. And like Christine Elliott really thought she won it, and it was like this whole big thing. But yeah, that was extremely close too. Yeah, Mark, totally agree. Like, yeah, making the chart, like FDR is not perfect, but like FDR was right when he said necessitous men are not free men. And if you want true liberty, you need a baseline of basic material dignity. And I think that's where like a charter right to food and stuff comes in. I mean, Connor, again, the NDP will have candidates at election time. This is literally how it goes in every election for most parties. The NDP is over 300 candidates now. And, they will have candidates in every riding. Ben, the Greens are stronger than the NDP in the Maritimes only in New Brunswick and PEI, where the NDP's never been strong. In Nova Scotia and in Newfoundland, that's not the case, especially Newfoundland, but even Nova Scotia. No, John, you're right. They would never take Moncton. I meant Fredericton because they have a provincial seat there. David Kuhn is there. Thanks for the correction. Joshua says, how are the NDP not winning? I don't know. I mean, strategic voting. There's a whole bunch of reasons. We just got to keep pushing. This election's a long election. We got to keep pushing. David said I think we could almost get the PPC to split the vote, maybe. But if you careful what you wish for, in empowering the far right. But yeah, that could happen. Christo, is there any green policy you favor over current NDP policy? I don't know. Not off the top of my head. And that's not to say that there isn't any, but I can't think of any right now. I can't right now. I mean, if I was to sit down, I mean, maybe there'd be some, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. Yeah, Ben says Corbyn has a policy of having workers vote on whether they should call. I'm in general support of those ideas. I mean, I'd have to look at Corbyn's policy and see how it can apply to Canada specifically. Again, we have to deal with the fact that in Canada, we have provinces and there's jurisdictional challenges that don't quite exist the same way in Britain. I know they have the devolved parliaments in Scotland, Ireland, or Northern Ireland and Wales, but it's not quite the same. And so I don't know if you could just transplant Corbyn's plan, but I do like the general idea of the government helping to facilitate worker ownership and worker representation in companies. And I think that's a great idea. I'm very much in support of that. Dan said they can win in Atlantic Canada with a good green jobs proposal. I think that's a good point. It's always hard to sell, a party to people that historically hasn't done a whole lot in the region. But you're right. If you could sell a credible green jobs program, that could have a great effect. Lang and O'Leary exchange. I have to admit that was a pretty good show. Like from an entertainment perspective, I didn't like how it's like, oh, the right wing O'Leary versus the left wing Lang. When Lang was like a right wing liberal at best, it was like right versus center right. But it was actually really good. Sometimes when like Lang would have on like a left leaning economist, like somebody from like an NDP slot, like a union economist, and those would be really interesting episodes. I kind of feel like that show could work again. Amanda Lang was entertaining, and O'Leary, from an objective perspective, was a good TV villain. Like, he was a good TV villain. Yeah, and Mark makes a great point. There's a lot of reasons to Ford winning. Again, a big one is first past the post. I mean, Ford only got like 40% support, but he gets all the power. Mark says, I wish OPSU wasn't so timid. OPSU, I understand OPSU's position. I would like to see them back the NDP a little bit more fervently, but their position is that they are the union of the public service and they don't want to be too partisan. I get that, but I do feel it was a mistake that they waited too long to endorse the NDP this time around. Although, I mean, again, like, I don't want to speak for OPSU and their membership and their leadership. I'm not a member of that union, and You know, the internal debates could have been much more complex than what I'm making them out to be. Random says, how out of touch people. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, man. Like Justin Trudeau doing this. I mean, it's weird. I would never have expected this, honestly. Like, it just doesn't seem like it's that Canadian of a thing. Like, I would have never expected to see Stephen Harper do this. Like, it's so weird. It's really weird. John Nuttall with a very generous super chat donation. Thank you so much, John. Says, mad respect for a fellow bog trotter. John, I very much appreciate it. That's like, there's so many ways to support the channel. The best way to support the channel, guys, is for you to watch, comment, subscribe, share it around with your friends. When you're a small growing channel like mine, exposure is what matters most. But you can give super chats. I have a Patreon. I have a PayPal. On all of those things, you can send me donations if you wish. Of course, I know not everyone has the desire or the means to do so, but your support really helps. It helps to improve the quality and quantity of content. As you guys know, over the last few months, my backdrop has gotten better. I've gotten a better camera. I've gotten a better microphone. I've gotten. I now usually make about 2 videos a day, not every day, but more often than not. And so on all of these things, that's because you guys have been supporting me, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, fully automated. Yeah, I did know that. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's, these things happen in politics. Like MPs resign all the time. I don't like the whole, like, I run for office and then resign 1 year in. I get sometimes like people have medical issues, but more often than not, it's like somebody gets a new career opportunity. I'm not a big fan of it. I think like it's an incredible honor to be elected to parliament or your provincial legislature or provincial parliament. And I don't like it. And you're right. It does leave people without representation for a long time. And with Ottawa Vanier in the Ontario Parliament, for instance, like that's a francophone riding. And so there's only so many of them. And so in ridings where there's a lot of francophones, if they lose their MP, that's like a key francophone voice gone from Queen's Park. So like that's like minority populations are losing representation, which is like even worse, right? Her, you could send me an email. It's just my name, all one space without spaces or dashes or anything at gmail.com. You can also send me you can tweet at me on Twitter. It's just my name at Christo Avalis. I use PowerPoint. One of my fans developed I used to use GIMP. Now I use PowerPoint because one of my fans developed a template for me that allows me to make quick and easy thumbnails. I needed something that I could just do because I make videos at random times of the day, and I don't have time to have a formal designer design me a thumbnail, because if it takes them even a day, the video's stale. So I use that, and I'm much happier with the quality of my thumbnails versus my older ones. You can go back and see. These are much better. But I mean, I'm always looking to improve. So if you have some suggestions and it's not too technically onerous, I might consider switching over again. Nelson, did Jagmeet say anything about getting rid of first past the post? He has, actually. Jagmeet Singh has talked about this, and the NDP has talked about this. What we've noted is that if there's a minority parliament, that's our number one thing to ask for if we have the balance of power, is to end first past the post with a proportional system, likely mixed member proportional. No referendum. We're not asking for a referendum. We just want the policy implemented. The NDP policy is, I think, a pretty balanced one. It would be that without referendum, we adopt a proportional system. After 2 elections, then we have a referendum. That way, people have tried the new system and can choose to keep it or go back to the old one. I think that's a fair way to do it. So yes, the NDP is on record supporting proportional representation. Ben says, I don't know why Unifor is so pro-liberal. I don't know either. I don't know either. I was very disappointed. A lot of unions are ABC. A lot of unions are ABC, but the Liberals, for instance, backed a candidate in Halifax in a riding where the Conservatives have no chance. That was very much them backing a Liberal. And so it was very disappointing for me and a lot of people. And so Brianna is here now. Little Demetrius went off to bed. Can everyone say hi to Bree? Say hi, Bree. Come on, you want to say hi?
Hello.
So Brianna's here. It'll make going through questions and stuff a little bit easier. So keep them coming. The last one we were on is I just talked. I'm going to.
Yeah, I'll have to find my spot.
Yeah.
Oh, Stephen Colbert is here.
Stephen Cole. So you want to start with that one? Would you say the end? Do you see that one? It's like, would you say the ND? That's one of the bigger distinctions. Is the NDP support in unions is a bit different. The Greens don't really have a whole lot of union support. Other factors include the roots of the party. The Greens have like roots in the progressive conservatives of the 80s and early 90s. The Greens have, I think, more of an upper middle class air to them, you know, but I think, yeah, the labor movement would be one of the bigger distinctions. Yeah.
Sorry, what would you say the biggest difference between NDP and Greens? And
yeah, so so I just did that one. So yeah, we'll just keep going. So we're getting recalibrated, guys.
Oh, apparently OSSTF said, Zachary Galvine says OSSTF said that they were disappointed picking the NDP in 2018.
Really? I hadn't heard that. You know, they can feel that way if they wish, but it wouldn't have mattered. I think that if they picked the Liberals, it would have just resulted in a Ford supermajority because the Liberals were tanking regardless. OSSTF support for the NDP has always been weak. They are more liberal leaning than, let's say, ETFO. I don't know why that is, but you know, maybe I don't know what to say. I need to look into it more to comment further, but I'd be disappointed to hear that.
Okay, Ben McInnes says, what do you think Jody Wilson-Raybould will do after this election, assuming she doesn't get reelected?
It's a good question. She's still very young. She might see if the Liberals flame out and try to come back to a Liberal party that's turf Trudeau. Maybe she'll look to provincial BC politics. And I think she could run either as a BC Liberal or a BC NDPer, depending on the narrative she chooses. She could just return to her community and return to that. She could, I think, build a career as a speaker and maybe try to transition into media. I think she has a lot of opportunities. You know, and I don't assume she's going to lose, but I think she has a lot of opportunities. Yeah. And she's trained as a lawyer. So yeah, Jody Wilson-Raybould has a lot of opportunities. I don't know if she's going to win or lose. My inkling, if I had to just guess right now, I think she might win that seat. In which case it'll be a very interesting turn of events.
Okay. Both Amir Faragog and Veritas, aka Kuro, said they just found you yesterday because you were on Michael Brooks' show.
Yes. Yeah. For those who didn't see it on the Michael Brooks channel, go check that out. I did an interview where we talked about the election, connecting Singh to the North American left. It was a fantastic interview. We had actually been planning it for a while, but we couldn't get our schedules to connect. So I was really glad to finally get that done. I know a lot of you guys were Michael Brooks fans, and some of you came over from that interview, and that's great to see. You know, it was very nice for Michael to have me on. And, you know, from that, I did gain about a couple hundred subscribers, or give or take, maybe a little bit more now. And so it was really nice of him to have me on, and I'd love to go on again sometime. So do go check that out on his channel. And if you haven't subscribed to his channel, be sure to do so.
Okay. Hare Weltruman says that he can make you some sort of template, making it simple as possible. I'm assuming that's part of a conversation I missed.
Yeah. Hare, if you want to reach out to me on Facebook, Twitter, email, send me something, I'll certainly take a look and compare it to my current template and whatnot. to see if it works for me and if it's too simple or too complicated or what have you. And we'll go from there because I'm always looking to improve my presentation.
Okay, Ben McInnes with follow up. If Jody does get reelected, do you think she'll stay independent or do you think she'll join the NDP or Greens?
I feel like if she was going to join a party, she would have already done it. Like, I felt a lot of people were reporting, credible journalists were reporting that she was going to join the Greens, over the weekend. Like, she made that announcement on the Monday, and people were reporting that weekend that she was about to join the Green Party. And so it didn't end up happening. So I thought her and Philpott were going to join the Greens. Now, will she stay an independent forever? I'm not sure. But my inkling is that if she wins as an independent, she'll stay as an independent at least for a little while. Maybe she'll make a decision again after this election. Maybe she's thinking that if Justin Trudeau flames out, then she could return to the Liberal Party with a "I told you so" basically platform and maybe try to take the leadership. I don't know.
Okay, QWERTY9454 says, what's the difference between the Greens and the NDP? Maybe just give a brief rundown.
Yeah, I mean, some of the differences include the NDP has more of a connection to labor. The NDP is I would say a center-left party, whereas the Greens are anywhere from center-left to center-right, depending on the issue. The Greens tend to have a little bit more specificity in their climate goals, but the NDP has more specificity in connecting their climate goals to a Green New Deal and to Indigenous justice. The NDP has a stronger commitment to social programs than the Greens. The Greens support a basic income, but they support one that would actually cut a lot of social programs and transfers. The Greens are less clear on where they stand on social issues. For example, we're not exactly sure where the Greens stand on including people who have anti-choice views, where the NDP is very clear on that. Those are the major differences. We could spend a whole little bit going over that. There's actually an article that somebody wrote, I think at the CBC, that tried to go down through the differences. And I thought, all in all, it was a pretty fair article. You look up like differences, Greens and NDP, you'll get an article about it. It was just recently written in the last week or so.
Stephen Colbert says Reform Party and PC merger was possible, so it might be possible for the NDP and the Greens to merge.
That's a great point. One thing I noted in my video on the subject, however, is that's a bit different. The PC Reform merger wasn't really a merger as much as it was a reconciliation. Because if we recall, those parties split back like the late 80s, early 90s. So it had been less than a generation, and they sort of came back together. But the Greens and the NDP had never existed together. It's not like the Greens broke away from the NDP in the 90s and now they want to merge again. And so I think it's a different question about two parties that broke away that come back together, and another between two parties that have never been part of the same tradition but want to merge. The second is way less likely and way more complicated. Like similarly, like the Wild Rose and the PCs merged to form the UCP in Alberta, but they had broken up just a few years before that. So it was a reconciliation more than a merger.
Okay, Zachary Galvine says, do you have a preference for electoral reform? If it is MMP, do you like Jenkins MMP?
I'm not sure what Jenkins means, if I'm being honest. My general preference is for a 5% threshold open list. And so what I mean by that is the way MMP works is that you split the country into regions. You vote for your local MP, and then you vote regionally. And so there you vote for your party. But the party does not get to choose the ordering of their lists. And the lists are built from the candidates running. So unlike certain European proportional representation models, where the parties elect the slates at the central office, giving the people not very much of a say about the ordering of their candidates, with an open list mixed member proportional, the parties don't get to choose the lists. The voters choose the lists. And I think that's the one I support. I don't know what you mean by Jenkins. If you clarify, I can comment further, but that's what I support.
Yeah, Zachary, why don't you just, if you can clarify that in the comments, I'll get to it as we work our way down. The NDP has postal banking in this platform. Or, sorry, Adam B says the NDP has postal banking in this platform. Correct question. Is this something you believe we should highlight more?
Yeah, it's certainly something we should highlight more. I like the idea of postal banking. I think it's great. I wrote a piece for it for rankandfile.ca a couple years ago that maybe you guys could check out. Basically, I think it's great for a whole bunch of reasons. One, more and more banks aren't serving small, isolated rural communities, and there are more post offices in those communities than banks. So that gives people banking services in their communities. Postal banking could also provide specific banking services for marginalized people that mainline banks don't. I think also that they could challenge payday loan companies. Certain postal banking companies, I believe in Italy, provide short-term microloans, but not at like loan shark rates like payday loan stores do. And so on all of those fronts, whether it's helping isolated communities or providing services to people that need them, I think postal banking is a good idea. And it will likely be a money generator and a good job creator. I think it's a great idea. I really do.
Okay, Joshua Hunt. Hi, Joshua. Good. Thank you for joining us again. Good to see you. Says, has Jagmeet ever mentioned decriminalizing drugs and treating addicts?
He has actually. He has. He hasn't been talking about it as much in this election, and I don't know if they're waiting for, like, he's sort of been doing the campaign stops and then pairing it with an announcement. So, like, when he was in Kingston, he talked about, like, small farmers and small business people because he was at a farmer's market. And so when he was at another town, he talked about dental care, and he was at, like, a dentist's office. So he might be doing that. So you could look at him to make a specific announcement, but Jagmeet Singh has taken the stand that he wants full decriminalization of all recreational drugs. Not legalization, at least not yet, but decriminalization. Because again, as you hint, Jagmeet says we have to treat drug use not as a criminal justice issue, but as a mental health issue. And when we treat it as such, we realize that we can make people's lives better, that we can reduce the effects of biased policing in poor and in racialized communities. We can destigmatize drug use, which means that people will be less likely to do it in the shadows, which means that less people will die from preventable overdose deaths and things like that. Yeah, he's a supporter of that. And I mean, I don't know if Jagmeet is going to model it after the Portuguese model, but there's been a lot talked about the Portuguese decriminalization model and how that's been a real success. So yeah, Jagmeet has talked about that. And I think he's right to do so.
Okay, Ben McInnes asks, do you think Peter Stoffel will ever be a candidate again?
Peter Stoffel, I'm not sure. That's a good question. I don't know. I feel like a lot of the people who wanted to run again, like the defeated NDP candidates in 2015, are running again now. There's a whole bunch of them actually all over the country that are running again, like Andrew Cash, Jack Harris. There's a bunch in Quebec and in some in BC as well who are running again. I don't know if Stouffer will be one of them, but I don't know him personally or even really that much professionally. So I don't want to speak for him, but I would say that if he was really up for it, he'd be running now, but don't count him out.
Okay, Connor Blanchard. Hi, Connor. Thanks for joining us again. Says, in your opinion, Christo, how do you think Jagmeet Singh and Bernie Sanders compare in terms of their platforms and held views?
I think they have similar views and similar. I would think they're quite similar. They have very different styles. Obviously, Jagmeet is very nice suits, very prim and proper. Bernie is more, and I say this with all love, disheveled. Like, you know what I mean? He's just like, that's part of Bernie's mystique, right? But I think they have a similar vision. I think Bernie's platform is maybe a little bit more strident right now, but it's hard to compare Bernie and Jagmeet right now because Bernie is running for a primary nomination. Jagmeet is running to be prime minister right now, and Bernie will probably shift his tone a little bit in the general election. I hope he wins the nomination. I think they have a similar set of views. I think they both want to challenge the rich and the powerful. And I think that there's a great opportunity for cooperation between the two. And I think you can throw Jeremy Corbyn in there. Jeremy Corbyn and Jagmeet Singh have had some phone conversations with one another. And I think that's very good to see some cooperation amongst the left in Canada, the United States, Britain, and other countries. I think that's great to see. I mean, I think that one thing Bernie does that Singh has only started to do, but probably should have started earlier, was be more open in the, like, I'm taking on the rich and powerful and standing with the regular people, like the open class analysis. And I've noted this for years, even going back to 2015, which is like, what is Bernie Sanders teaching the left in Canada? That you have to be against the rich. It's not enough to just be like, we're going to help the poor, but we're not really against anybody. It's like, no, you have to take a stand. You have to say, like, we're fighting the rich and powerful. And Jagmeet Singh has started to do that. And I think he is learning something from Bernie Sanders. Now, the styles are always going to be different. Singh isn't Bernie Sanders. He's not going to be angry like Bernie Sanders, but he does have, he has learned something from Bernie, and I think that's great to see.
Okay, Lisa Hildebrandt, hi Lisa, says Premier Jason Kenney got rid of Bill 2 card check when it comes to unions. She says that really frosted my cake and ticked me off. I know it's a serious subject, but that was just funny.
No, Lisa, you're right. It's really bad. A card check is a great tool to help people form unions. And this is what we see whenever an NDP government comes in. We almost always institute card check, which makes it easier to form a union. And then whenever a liberal or conservative government follows us, they get rid of it. Right. And that's the fact. And like, I could say I wish I was surprised, but I mean, we had to know that when Jason Kenney won, that would be a guarantee that he would take that away. They look, the reason why conservatives and liberals and business and not all business owners, of course, but most, capitalists don't like unions is because unions share the wealth a bit. And so you want to make it harder to form a union. Jason Kenney has done that in Alberta, which is unfortunate to see.
Okay, this is a good question. This next one here, I like it. Alibi says,
well, they're all good questions.
They're all good questions, but I like this one in particular. Alibi says, what made you like the NDP and the NDP party?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, as a kid, my family was politically engaged, but not in a partisan way. Like, we watched the 6 o'clock news in Moncton every night. We watched CTV news every night, and we'd always see like the politicians. So I followed politics like pretty closely as a youth. And I'm ashamed to say that the first time I voted for the dirty Liberal Party. I know, I wish I could take it back. I was young and stupid. But what I realized in my going to university, because that was in my first year of university, was that like the NDP was like the party of labor, that they were the party of universal health care. And the more I learned about, all of those things, the more I realized that that was the party that spoke to me, like the party of working people, the party of social programs, the party that so many times has been right about the issues, even when it was unpopular to be right. And I was like, there's something noble about that. So that's what drew me to the NDP. That's what drew me to the NDP. Yeah.
Okay. Fully automated luxury LGBT plus trans humanist space and calm says, any chance you think of Canadian republicanism being discussed this election, or even in a few years when the Queen passes?
Not this election. I don't see it. Not this election. But I do think that if it's going to happen, the Queen passing away would be a window for that to happen. But then again, people seem to like Kate and William.
They're very, very popular.
Yeah, and people like Harry and Meghan. And so, and they got like young children, and the children are cute. And so I wonder if Charles and Camilla get skipped over, or if people are like, look, Charles is already in his 70s. We only got to put up with him for like 20 years at most. This family lives a long time. But, maybe they're like, we only got, maybe they feel like because there's only a short amount of time they have to deal with Prince Charles. I don't know if there's going to be a major talk of republicanism. I just don't see. I don't know if that's a priority for most Canadians. I don't know. I mean, I see that, like, I'm not a monarchist. And I guess if I formed a majority government and had absolute power, eventually I would get around to, I guess, making Canada a republic, or like a constitutional, non-hereditary monarch, something like that. Like, I would do that. But Like, I mean, I don't know if that would be something I would do even in the first 10 years of my absolute reign of power, because I literally think there are thousands of more things important to do. That's just my view.
Okay. Stephen Colbert says it's not like the NDP didn't try to shift hella right during the last election under Mulcair, refusing to honestly promote efficient financing.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a fan of that. I worked on my local campaign. I wrote a lot about after that election how that was a bad idea. Mulcair, see, Mulcair's campaign was really interesting. He didn't really shift to the right. Mulcair still ran on childcare. Remember that awful slogan, childcare, dental care, Mulcair. Do you guys remember that? But he was running on these great programs. The problem with Mulcair is that the rhetoric and the financial understanding, as you noted, did not match that. So Mulcair did not run a right-wing campaign. It was to the left of the Liberal campaign, 100%. People will say that Trudeau outlefted the NDP. He didn't at all. But Tom Mulcair absolutely failed at being honest with people. He said we weren't going to raise taxes and we weren't going to raise the deficit and I'm going to create new programs. Rightfully so, people knew that was BS. Jagmeet Singh this time is being honest with people. He says, look, I'm not going out to run deficits on purpose, but I'll do it if necessary. But the issue is that by shifting existing revenues and by taxing the rich more, we might not need to raise any deficits and still get programs Canadians need. As we noted today, you can provide dental care to every household under $70,000 a year of income, and it costs less than $1 billion a year to do it. Like, that is pocket change. Trudeau found $4.5 billion in his couch to buy a pipeline. We can provide people dental care for $1 billion a year or less. And I think, like, it's a matter of priorities too. And I think that Mulcair was not honest enough with people, and he wanted to look like he wasn't going to raise taxes on the rich and all of this. And like, people didn't buy it. People didn't buy it. It wasn't credible. And I think Singh right now, whether you agree with him or not is a question. But, you know, I think like he's open with people. I'm going to create new programs by taxing the rich and by shifting existing government revenues towards those programs.
Okay. Troud Chu says, very glad to have found you through Michael Brooks. I'm also from New Brunswick. Where are you originally from, out of curiosity?
I'm from Moncton originally. I grew up in Moncton, lived there I was born in 87, lived there until 2005 when I moved to Fredericton, or at least during the school years. I did my undergraduate degree at UNB Fredericton, and then moved out to Kingston in Ontario about 10 years ago to do grad school. Met Brianna here on the first day, saved her from a bee, and it's been a love story ever since.
Oh my God, he did not save me from a bee. I can't believe you just
yeah, I saved her from a bee. I saved her from a bee. But growing up in New Brunswick was great. I went to Bernice McNaughton High School, the best high school of all the schools. I don't really care. I don't have school pride, but yeah. So I grew up in Moncton. Yeah, Moncton was a nice place to grow up. I think all in all, it was good. I had a good childhood.
Okay. Lisa Hildebrandt says, Christo, do you know if Jagmeet Singh's platform includes ending the blood ban? Justin Trudeau did not get it done.
Yes, it does. The NDP has been hammering on that the entire time, that Justin Trudeau could have ended the blood ban and chose not to. The NDP supports ending that blood ban. And for those who don't know, that's the specific ban on certain people, primarily men who have sex with men, giving blood for to the Red Cross and things like that. It used to be considered that there was a higher risk of certain transmissions, but science, I think, has largely disagreed with that. But there's still resistance. The NDP suggests that it's largely just discrimination and that we need to change it.
Okay, Lovely Pariah says, at Christophe Elise, kindly turn up the volume, rereading the question. So I'll try to get closer to the mic. Oh, shit, you can see my head.
Yeah.
Never mind, I'm coming back.
Sorry about that, Lovely. It's just this microphone. The good thing about this microphone is it's very much focused on my voice to limit static, which I did get on my old mic. The downside to that is that even from the sides, it's hard to hear people, and I only have one microphone.
But I'll try to talk more loudly. So if people can hear me better, please let me know. Okay. Zachary Galvine, Christo, do you support the NDP Socialist Caucus?
Okay, we're gonna go into this one. I like most of what they believe, but I don't know if I agree how they approach things. They're very abrasive. And I feel like they don't always represent the diversity of people in the room. And I feel like when I listen to them, I'm like, you're saying everything I agree with, and somehow I'm still like grumpy because, like, I don't know. I think they have a messaging and a presentation issue. Yeah, that would be my concern. Their views are generally right. The party does need to be more bold. The party does need to be more ambitious, and they've had an effect. I think that every once in a while they get through to people, but I'm not really a member of the Socialist Caucus. My goal is to make the party more socialist, and I don't know if, for me, my way to do that is through the Socialist Caucus.
The Socialist Caucus is just basically old white men screaming at you that you're wrong.
I mean, that's Brianna's perspective.
I'm just saying. Okay. Zachary Galvine has got back to us. Jenkins is the first vote is ranked choice, and the second vote is an open list proportional representation. This is instead of MMP, where the first vote is first past the post.
I haven't thought about that. I'm generally against ranked ballots in multi-seat elections. So, for instance, I support ranked ballot in municipal politics when there's no parties. So I support ranked ballot, in which we have in our upcoming, our next municipal elections in 2022 will be ranked ballot. And I support that because there is no parties. There's no way to split the vote because there's no way to redistribute the vote, because there's no party mechanism. But I haven't thought about a ranked ballot combined with a mixed member thing. That's a really interesting question. I haven't thought about it. I'd have to look into that.
You should look into it and make a video.
I might make a video about that. Yeah, well, we'll have to see.
Okay. Second Mayor says hashtag brownface is now trending in the U.S. on Twitter. Might be a few hard days for Trudeau.
It might be a few hard days for Trudeau. Indeed. Like I said, I'm gonna likely weigh in as soon as the stream is done. I'm gonna maybe make a video on this issue. It's pretty bad. Justin Trudeau, I know he's offered an apology, but I don't know if that's going to be enough for a lot of people.
Okay. Oatmeal 1209 says Jagmeet called recreational drug use a healthcare issue in the last debate.
Yeah.
No,
you're right. And I think, yeah.
Okay. Stayfi 17 says, can you talk about whether NAFTA is a good deal for Canada?
It depends what do you mean by Canada, if I'm being honest. I mean, certain parts of Canada, certain populations in Canada did very well. On aggregate, free trade likely increased per capita wealth, but it's the distribution of the proceeds of the trade that's the issue. And I think that's where we get into trouble, right? It's not that Canada doesn't have more wealth because of the trade. It's that entire community suffered. A lot of good union jobs were lost. A lot of working class people lost good, secure employment, and this affected their family. And a lot of wealth was made for not a very few, for some people, but they weren't very many people. And so I would say that, and I noted this on the Michael Brooks show yesterday, that there is a potential for left-wing free trade, but it has to be based on, working class goals. It has to be based on solidarity with workers across Canada, the US, and Mexico. It has to be based on the improvement of labor standards. For instance, I noted that, let's say a Bernie Sanders presidency ended right to work, and we could build universal card check certification being a part of a continental union program, building labor standards that cross all three countries. I mean, these are things that we could dream of, not to use the free trade zone as a baseline to lower all of our standards, but as a ceiling to lift them up. I think there's that potential. We don't have that right now, but maybe that's the future of left-wing free trade.
Okay, Lisa Hildebrand has a question, and she just gave a super chat. And so sorry, I just
What you
lost
Did you?
Hold on.
Oh, is it right there?
Yeah. So, have you considered having Kate Jacobs, Duncan Kinney, the progress report on your show?
Well, Lisa, thank you very much for the extremely generous donation. I very much appreciate it. As always, you've been very generous, it's super kind. I haven't actually approached either Duncan or sorry, his name's told me Kate before, but those would both be very good guests. Right now, if I do have more guests, they're likely going to be directly related to the election. I'm trying to maybe line up some more MPs to come on, but Kate would be great. And as you guys might know, I was on a fairly recent episode of Alberta Advantage where we talked about the history of the Winnipeg General Strike and how it's been understood over the last 30 or 40 years. And I did that interview primarily with Kate. So I would love to have her on. I think she'd be fantastic, and she's super funny and super smart. Go listen to Alberta Advantage. It's a great podcast. It's not just focused on Alberta, but it's mostly focused on the prairies. Although I think all Canadians at least would get good value out of listening.
Okay, both Veritas, aka Koru, and Fully Automated want to know what card check is.
Okay, so, and thanks for, I shouldn't have assumed. Okay, so in most jurisdictions in Canada right now, when you go to form a union, you have to basically determine what the prospective bargaining unit is. You say, I want to organize all the workers at this grocery store, and say there's 100 workers there, and like not including managers and stuff. And so what you need to do is get a certain amount of them to sign a card saying they want to join a union. And then when you get enough cards, it's usually 40 or 50%, isn't it?
Well, they don't go for certification until it's above 80, but it's 50%.
Yeah. But then, yeah. And so once you get about 50% of the cards signed, but you usually go for more to buffer, then you go to the labor board, and then then you schedule a vote, usually for a few weeks down the line. And then you have a secret ballot vote where all the people who are eligible to be a member of that union vote for or against the union. And if you win that vote, the union is formed. And if you lose that vote, the union is not formed. But the problem with that is you've already gotten a majority of the workers, some cases a super majority, to agree to the union. And that 3 or 4 week window is just used by the employer to, through legal and illegal means, scare the crap out of workers who want to be in a union. And so what we found, what studies have found, what unions have found, what government reports have found, is that this sort of system is bad for unionization levels. And Canada has what you would call a representation gap. It means that there are more workers there are a fairly large amount of workers who want a union but do not have one. And it's because of things like this. Under a card check system, the way it works is it starts the same way. You say there's 100 people at this grocery store. We want to form a union. Once you get 55, 60% of the cards signed, every jurisdiction would have it differently. And the cards are read as valid. The employer will have the right to challenge them and make sure they're valid and all that. Once you've confirmed that at least 60% of your union or the unit supports it, the union is automatically formed. That's how it works in Quebec, I think. Certain industries in Ontario have that, but in most of the country, in most of the provinces, the voting system is the way it works. And it's like that because Liberal and Conservative, and even Green, because the Greens have blocked card check in BC, they all support blocking, making it harder for people to join a union. Now, some people will suggest the secret ballot is important, but really, though, it's just an alternative step. It's just an additional step to make it harder for people to form a union. So that's why card check is important.
Okay, Alexander Rochette says, I just arrived, but did you discuss the article here? Did you discuss the article here in Quebec from L'Actualité that gave the NDP the highest grade on the first week of campaigning?
I did, actually. I did. We talked about that piece briefly that kind of gave the first week report cards. The NDP and the Bloc did very well from the author's perspective. The rest of the parties, not so much. And yeah, he spoke both highly of the NDP being focused on good, clear policy, but also he said Jagmeet has a real love of campaigning. And I think we can agree about that. I know not everyone is a huge Jagmeet fan, but my God, is he good on the campaign trail, right? And I think it's really showing that this is what he was made for, was meeting people, because he's good at it. He's really good at it.
Okay, Travis Trainer says, what's the NDP stance on pipelines, east, west, or none?
The NDP federally it doesn't want to build any more pipelines, and as a general policy against all fossil fuel subsidies. So we would not have, for instance, bought the Trans-Canada pipeline. We don't support that. Especially, we don't support Energy East. We don't support that one at all. One, it's awful. Quebecers do not want it. At least most Quebecers don't. And the NDP doesn't want to back that policy. But even pipelines westward, the NDP does not support subsidizing fossil fuels. And again, I think it's quite clear that that pipeline probably won't work without subsidy.
Okay. Both Michael Fisher and Ben McInnes are saying, don't worry about voting for a Liberal. Michael Fisher says, as Jack Layton once said, many of us came from other parties. And Ben McInnes says his family was always PC. His uncle was actually a PC MP from Halifax from 84 to 88 under Mulroney. But he lost in 88 and was offered a Senate appointment, but he declined. So we all come from different backgrounds. Although I would just like to make it clear that I never voted for the Liberals.
Brianna's always voted. She's always been orange, both in hair and in voting.
No one knows I have red hair, so stop it.
Brianna has red hair. Sorry. But no, I mean, and yeah, actually that's a really cool story, because my stepdad actually ran for the NDP well before I was born. He ran for the NDP in the 1980s in New Brunswick. And did okay. He ran against a cabinet minister and had a good result for the NDP in Moncton. And so that was a cool story. I didn't really know that for a long time, and he told me one time. It was really cool to see.
Okay, Derek Brennan, follow up to the NDP stance on pipeline question. Do you think there's any chance to stop Line 3 or the Trans Mountain Pipeline?
Whew. I don't know. I mean, I think the best chance is, Indigenous rights and consent being the best chance. It's harder to stop it through, say, the BC NDP, because in general, whether I like it or not, the federal government has pretty broad prerogative over trade that crosses national or provincial boundaries. So this is why, when you talk about what industries are federal and provincial, this is why railways and banks and phone companies and internet companies and all these things are federal. It's because by definition, they cross, they're never really localized in one region or one province. And so pipelines, by virtue of the fact that they cross provincial lines and eventually have the goal of facilitating international trade, are much more likely to be recognized as that. But Indigenous nations are not provinces. They have different rights and different relationships with the federal government. And I think that's a chance that could be stopped. But I don't want to place a bet on how likely, if, when, I'm not sure. Or, I mean, maybe the project just isn't viable anymore, given the price of oil. I mean, that could be a factor too.
Okay, Troud Chu says, sorry if this has been answered already, but if you were to put money on it, do you think it's going to be a Liberal minority government or a Conservative minority government?
Whew, right now, this is before the news broke tonight, and it could be totally different tomorrow, or maybe it's the same. Right now, the Liberals have the edge because of the way the votes are distributed. All things being equal, in popular vote, it's pretty much tied. Some pollsters have it tied. Some have the Liberals up, some have the Conservatives up. But the Liberals have a big lead in Ontario and a decent lead in Quebec. And the effect of that is that Ontario and Quebec are where most of the seats are. And the Conservatives have massive leads in Alberta and Saskatchewan. But there's only so many seats in Alberta and Saskatchewan. And at least in Alberta, they have almost all of them already. And they have most of them in Saskatchewan too. So in some ways, it's like the Tories are wasting votes in the prairie provinces. And the Liberals have a much more efficient vote in places like the 905. So if I was to wager right now all things being equal, the Liberals could win. In fact, some people are projecting that the Liberals could lose the popular vote and win not just a minority, but a majority government with about 35%. Their vote is that efficient this time around. So I think it's especially important to go to your friends if they live in a Liberal riding and to get them to help defeat a Trudeau majority. Because even if you don't want to see a sheer government, and I don't think, well, maybe some people here do, but most of us don't. The reality is we need a minority government. We need a government accountable to the NDP, and that's how we're going to get real change. So, Trudeau is actually getting close to a majority right now, even though he's losing the popular vote in some polls, because that's how badly it's going for Andrew Scheer in Ontario.
Okay, Ankit Mashra says, do you think taxing wealth and increasing corporate tax should be used to reduce deficit? If not, then what should be a fair way to manage the government's debts and deficit?
In general, I do think that, raising taxes on the wealthy should be a priority right now. I don't know about the prioritization between deficit reduction and providing programs. But in general, I do feel 100%, you make a great point. Conservatives often like to talk about deficits, but then they cut taxes, which raises the deficit. I think in some ways, if we really do feel the deficit is an issue, then the richest people in our society who can afford it should have to make a sacrifice to help pay down the debt. And the best way to do that is capital gains and wealth taxes, because that's how rich people have and make most of their money. Top bracket income taxes are good, but what matters most is taxing capital gains and wealth. That's when you really strike at the rich.
Okay. And McKinnis says, ew, Moncton, love a Haligonian, which is pretty funny. Okay. Stephen Colbert wants us to clarify a bee sting or a bee mark in school. It was a live bee, like a hornet, and Christo did not save me from it.
I did. I definitely did not sting her, but it was menacing her.
Oh my God. Okay. A real question now that people actually want to hear about.
Well, we'll see.
Okay. Zachary Galvine, do you think that the tax wealth should be higher? And do you think there's a point at which we should say 100% tax rate, like past 1 billion?
I would probably say at some point, like you have enough money, 100% wealth tax or something approaching that, like a 95 would be warranted. I think what the NDP has done here is reasonable. I think they've looked at what Canadians support and saw that this would work. And I think that it's probably a good balance. I probably would have started it a little bit lower. I would have said 1% after, say, 10 million, and then maybe 2% after 20, maybe 3% after 30, and then, done a little bit more like that. It's similar to Elizabeth Warren's plan. Warren has a 2% after 100 million, but hers only starts at 50 million, I think, at 1%. So I think Singh's is better because there's very, very few people with $100 million of wealth. It's almost not worth making a distinction. So I think this is a good start. But I do think that it could be more ambitious, and maybe it will be in the future.
Okay. Crispy Critter says, what will Jagmeet do about the upcoming poll shift?
I mean, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, the polls have been up and down. I think Jagmeet has his plan, and he's going to stick to that plan. The one thing I'll say is it does look like the Greens are tumbling quite a bit, actually. And I think, and not only because of that, but because of the fact that the election has started, I'm going to be talking less about the Greens and more about the Conservatives and Liberals. And I think Jagmeet Singh is going to be doing the same. The Green Party is not really going to be our focus. We're going to focus on Justin Trudeau's failures and the dangers Andrew Scheer poses, saying we're an alternative to both. I think that's going to be Singh's focus. I don't know if he's going to be paying that much attention to the polls day to day. I think he's going to go out with his message. But then again, I'm not sure. I don't have an ear into the inner campaign.
Okay, QWERTY9454 says, I'm a student about to enter a career in IT. Do white-collar employees have a place in unions?
Yes, they do. 100% they do. Now, in IT, video games, tech industry broadly defined, you guys are less unionized. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. IT workers, at least in a relative sense, have better wages. And often people think, well, we don't need a union. We get paid so well. But there are a lot of issues in white collar jobs that unions are very good at addressing. So one of them is like work-life balance. In a lot of white-collar jobs, like you don't really always have a strict 9 to 5. And sometimes it's good because it gives you flexibility, but other times it's bad because you're expected to stay late a whole bunch. And a union could stipulate, when you work and when you don't work, or it could stipulate that you get extra pay for overtime or extra vacation for overtime. And these sorts of things are really key. And one thing to note, and this is very important, is that a lot of white collar workers don't like the idea of unions because they feel they breed uniformity. And like, I have to say that the way unions work on a factory line don't have to be the way they work in an office. And Brianna's an expert on this. Brianna is the vice president of a union of over 1,000 workers here in Kingston that represents largely clerical support staff workers. And they have, a salary grid and all that, but there are all sorts of exceptions for expertise. And there's all these sorts of, flexibilities that exist that are important. And so, for instance, there's no reason why, for instance, you can't have a union, but also still have bonuses and merit pay within that union contract. The difference is that the boss wouldn't just get to decide willy-nilly who gets, bonuses and who gets special treatment, but rather that, rewarding hard extra work with extra pay would have to be recognized as a fair and equal system. And I think the future of unions, they have to become more successful at organizing IT workers, video game workers, tech workers. Because again, the wages in those industries are good, but the working conditions can be horrid sometimes.
Well, and it's not really about, an IT worker, getting merit pay or bonus pay or whatever. I mean, IT workers, all workers, they have issues with harassment. They have issues with return to work, overpay, hours of work. Any problem that any other office worker would have, and an IT worker would have as well. So, we have, I think, over 75 IT workers in my local, and they have the exact same problems as all the other ones. So yeah, they absolutely belong in the union.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, health and safety issues, physical health and safety, like carpal tunnel, things like that. But honestly, like mental health issues, you need a union to protect your interests there.
Okay. Oatmeal 1209 says, I wish we could vote for issues rather than people or parties.
Well, I mean, some people have suggested the future of voting could be more digital. With the internet and stuff, you could have a decentralized voting. And of course, you can get issues onto local ballots sometimes, but I don't know if we're there yet. I don't know if we're there. I do get that perspective, but it's also it's awfully tricky to implement. The United States has that somewhat, where if enough people sign a petition, you can basically get a something on the ballot. And people forget this, but the night Donald Trump won the 2016 presidential election, many states voted to legalize marijuana and voted to implement a $15 minimum wage. And some of those states voted for Trump. So it was very interesting. Some states elected Donald Trump and then passed a $15 minimum wage and legalized weed. And so maybe we need a more of an American style approach to have issues on the ballot, but that's just not how we do politics in Canada.
Okay, Fully Automated asks, is direct democracy in any form good in your opinion? Think maybe like the online party from a few years ago, or maybe some other way, but thoughts on direct democracy?
I like elements of it, and I definitely would like to see how it could work, maybe starting in certain municipalities. I have concerns about, who would have time to participate. I worry about manipulation. I worry about, all sorts of things. But in general, I wonder, like, I would be interested to see how it works. I would need to see like a test run in a municipality. I don't know, but I would be interested. I'm not 100% opposed to some. I would never want to move away from a system without full-time politicians until we build, like a socialist society or something. I still think that it's important to have elected officials and a structure like that. But I wouldn't mind elements of everyday democracy being worked in through online voting and things like that. I wouldn't mind that. But again, I have to figure out how it would be done in an equitable manner. And I don't know that.
Okay, Zachary Galvine, do you think that we should nationalize internet?
I don't know if you can nationalize the internet. I don't know if anyone owns the internet, but I do think we need a national telecom company. I do think that. I think we need a like, a SaskTel or something for the federal, like owned by the federal government. That's my view. That would provide internet as a basic human right, because it is. But I don't know if you can own the internet. I don't know if you can't own an internet. You can't own the sun. You can't own memes. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if you can own, you know what I mean? Like,
well, no, I think the question is more nationalize providing the
Yeah.
internet, like nationalize the companies that provide,
Yeah.
internet service.
Yeah. Yeah.
To bring you back on track a little bit.
Yeah. Well, yes, Brianna's right. Maybe like my jokes, I wasn't as funny as I normally am.
He's not funny. He thinks he's funny and he's not. You guys just call him on it. He's not funny.
Okay. Thank you, sweetheart. Yes, I do support a national telecom company. I do. I think it would be a good move.
Thank you for that question. Skip07UA says, thoughts on the last U.S. Democratic debate.
I actually didn't watch it because I was watching the Canadian debate and then came on and did a live stream about that. I should have gone back and watched it, but it's just been crazy, Canadian politics. I just haven't had the time. And I was working on an article I'm doing for an upcoming edited collection. And it was a crazy week for me. So I didn't even have time to go back and watch it. From what I heard, Bernie did okay. From what I heard, Joe Biden's teeth may or may not be falling out. In general, I think it's a 3-person race. I think, it's going to be Biden, Warren, or Sanders. And I hope it's Sanders. I really hope it's not Biden. I guess it would be okay if it was Warren. But I think it's really going to start kicking into gear as we approach the first caucuses and primaries. We're still like 5 months away from the first vote. It's a long time.
Okay, Lovely Pariah says, what works of fiction have had a significant influence on your views? Or what are your favorites? By arts, I mean, of course, all popular indie, highbrow, etc. Fiction, poetry, music, spoken word, dance, visual arts, theater, screen arts, gaming, etc.
It's a good question. I mean, I play a lot of video games. That would probably be like the place where I'd be most influential. Like games like Earthbound were really influential to me. Games like Skyrim was very influential. Some of the Final Fantasies were.
On your views, your views.
Yeah. Views. Like in terms of politics, I mean, I don't know how much of that came from popular culture as much as it came from my academic studies. But I mean, like certain episodes of The Simpsons, and I've talked about them, they talked about unions. Like the Simpsons union episode always really spoke to me. And I always thought like it was a cool episode. And as I grew up, Last Exit to Springfield, where, Homer and the nuclear plant workers go on strike. And I've made a video about that. I have, that was always really cool to me. And so that would be a good example of like my sense of like social justice in that way. So like that would be a good example. But that's a really hard question about how it's influenced my political views. Brianna was something. What happened?
They want to know the B story.
Okay, they want to know the B story. Okay, so let me set the stage. It's 2009, and I had just moved from New Brunswick to Kingston to start my master's degree in history, and Brianna had just moved from Aurelia. But she had done her undergraduate degree in Thunder Bay and at Lakehead, and she had moved here to do her master's in history as well. And so we met on the first day, and we were standing there, and like one of the garbage cans was really full because it was like frosh week for the undergrads, and it was like grad school orientation. The campus was a madhouse, and there was like a whole bunch of bees floating around the garbage can. And then like one of them almost landed on Brianna, and then I like scared the bee away, and in so doing saved her life. She's not allergic to bees, but it was one of those rare poisonous bees that we get here in Canada.
Lie.
They're called venom bees, and so I knew you because you can tell by the distinct pattern on them. They have a little V on their little coat.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
And so Brianna has ever been grateful for that. And I don't know if she fell in love with me then and there, but it was soon after. It was soon after. And that's the story.
Not a word of that is true, except that it was our first day of orientation and a bee landed on me. Everything else is just a lie. Like, we're moving on.
Yeah.
We are moving on. I can't even deal with you right now. Okay. Skip07UA says, talk about the difference between Canada's single payer versus Bernie's MFA bill, please. Thanks.
Well, the current single payer leaves a lot of things out that Bernie would cover. And I think that's important to note. Bernie wants to include like pharma and dental and things like that. The current model doesn't include that. That's the biggest difference. Another factor that would be a bit different is administration. And again, constitutionally, Canada's health system is fragmented into each individual province. Each individual province administers its own separate healthcare program. They don't all cover the same things in the same way. So it could be the case that in Ontario, a certain procedure is covered, but in Quebec, it isn't, or vice versa. Or in some provinces, even they cover certain medicines, but not all of them, but the list they cover is different. And some provinces cover medicines for children, but not for others. And in some, you know what I mean? So it's province by province is a big distinction. And it would be very hard to create an actual federal plan. So what our government does is they have something called the Canada Health Act, which basically negotiates transfers between Canada and the provinces. Bernie has more lateral powers, I think, at the federal level to implement things. And those are like some of the big ones. And another factor that's different is ours was created at a different time. You know, in the 1960s, private health insurance plans weren't quite as big a thing back then as they are now. So there's a web to untangle for Bernie that there wasn't quite for Canada when we first created it.
Okay, Peggy Russell says, what do you think of a national bank?
A national bank, like in terms of like the Bank of Canada, or do you think like a National Crown Corporation bank?
The National Crown Corporation bank.
Yeah, I generally support that. I think postal banking could be a good use of that, like a Canada Post banking thing, where the outlets are all connected to Canada Post outlets. Like wherever there's a Canada Post, there's a bank, or you know what, most Canada Post outlets, there's a bank. I think that could really work, and I think that would be very helpful. It would be a good Crown Corporation. It would create good jobs. It could offer services to people who the big banks ignore. I support it. And I know the postal workers have made that a big campaign, and I know the NDP supports it. I think Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders actually support a postal bank as well in the States, and I think it's a good policy there too, 100%.
Okay, Skip07UA asks, thoughts on the eventual U.S. economic recession and the causes?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, the causes could be, you know, a commodities bubble. It could be housing. Canada, we're facing this as well, where in a few of our big cities, housing prices are inflated. I don't know when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen. Timing will be critical. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen in time for our election, but it might happen in time for yours. And that could create a lot of chaos, right? That could create a ton of chaos. It could really punish the Republicans because they are in power. Or like if it's really Trump could like seize the moment as a strong man. Like, I don't know what'll happen. And the cause will matter too, right? I don't know what the cause will be this time. I don't think it'll be bank collapse as it was before. It might just be like a collapse of general speculation. But I don't think it'll be as bad as 2007. But it could be a bad recession. Could be a bit of a bust, and that could create political volatility. But I'm not sure how it's going to play out exactly.
Okay. A's says, great appearances on the Michael Brooks show. It was awesome to see you bring more awareness to Canadian politics.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that's why Michael had me on, right? I mean, he has people. Michael's is great at talking to like the global left. He really does bring people on from different audiences, and I was very happy to come on and chat about Canada because I think it's great when Americans get to hear a little bit about Canada because we hear a lot about them, right? So I think it was great. It's great to and it was a really good interview. Talking with Michael was really effortless. Some interviews are really hard to get through because you don't have chemistry with the interviewer. Or if I'm interviewing somebody, sometimes the interviews are easier than other times. That was a really easy one. It was super gel. Like we really gelled together.
Okay, fully automated says some economists are saying that it's that the recession has already started and that Trump's China tariffs are in large part to blame.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to wait and see about whether a recession has started. We need to see data over multiple quarters to see a technical start of a recession. But yeah, I mean, definitely U.S.-China issues generally cause economic ripples. I mean, we have I have an RSP fund, and so I'll look at it and like my RSP will be down 3%, and then I was like, well, what did Trump say? And then I'll go on the internet and I'll see that Trump said something about China and like, oh, that's what happened. So definitely Trump China like is one of the biggest factors right now. Like when things look good for a couple days between the US and China, the market jumps and then it's going down. But I don't know if that on its own will cause a recession until we see, confirmed breakdowns. Then we might see, recessionary talk. Right now, it's just creating volatility, at least at this stage.
Crispy Critter is suggesting that automation is causing large ripples in the economy as well.
Yes, it is. It certainly is. And I think that both real and perceived, it's creating uncertainty for workers and investors and what have you. I think that we need to start thinking of solutions to help dull the effects of automation. I think that long term, a basic income is part of that, but I think better solutions include better social programs. I think shorter work weeks. I think workers' ownership of companies, funds to certain funds dedicated to retraining, better sharing of profits. We need to start it because the automation can be great. Automation can improve our society fantastically. But the benefits have to be shared with all classes, and they're not currently.
Okay, Veritas wants to know, how did Michael find you?
I'm not sure exactly. I mean, we sort of just started talking on Twitter after a while. I think we first connected on Twitter, but I don't know if he first found out about me maybe on David Dole's show. I've been on David Dole's show, and he, like Michael, has a fairly large following both on Twitter and YouTube. And I think that maybe seeing me on David Dole, he was like, I'd like to have him on the chat about Canada. I think that was probably the reason. But also, people I've seen every once in a while watching a show being like, have Christo on. And I think eventually after a while, he was like, okay, I'll look into who this guy is. And that started our conversation. And then so we had planned to have a chat earlier this summer, but like we had scheduling issues and finally we got it done and it was really great. So I think that's how he found me. I think through David, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, Zachary Galvine says, would you say that you're more status or anti-status statist? STATIST.
Oh, status
or anti-status left.
I'm probably more statist.
Can you define what that is for the rest of us?
Yeah, like I'm less of an and more of like, a planned economy guy. I'm not an anarchist in that sense. So like I'm more of like we're gonna plan the economy, public ownership being part of it, but also worker and cooperative ownership. I would say that's where I generally lean. But I am sympathetic to the fact that when I mean state, I don't necessarily fully mean the central state. I could mean municipal and provincial and territorial governments. It doesn't have to be all centered in Ottawa or Washington to be effective. It could be decentralized public ownership as well, in addition with cooperative and worker ownership. That would be generally my approach.
Okay, I think this next question might have you stumped, but we'll see.
Okay.
Skip07UA. Is there any correlation between the U.S.-China trade war and the Amazon fires and Brazil becoming a rising soybean producer, or is this a conspiracy thought? Thanks, you have fans in Alabama.
Well, Alabama, thank you so much. Great to have you. Hope things are good. Hope you didn't get hit by the recent hurricane. I know Trump tried to draw Sharpie you guys in. I don't know if you can if you were affected by Trump shenanigans there, but I don't know if there's a connection to all of that. I definitely do think the Brazilian fires are more than climate change related. I do have a feeling that you can't disconnect what's happening in Brazil from climate. That's true, but neither can you disconnect it from Bolsonaro's desire to dispossess and displace the indigenous people of the Amazon. And I think that the fire is a way to do that. And I think that farmers like Bolsonaro, pro Bolsonaro farmers and developers and whatnot have been doing something to that's fine.
Sorry, I hit the camera.
to stoke this literally and figuratively. And I think that Brazil trying to clear the Amazon is their way of displacing indigenous people to claim ownership of the land. And this is one of the reasons I noted this in a video I made, why I think Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland aligning with Brazil is so troubling. It's not just the environment, it's how they treat indigenous people. And indigenous rights matter everywhere, not just in Canada.
Okay, Brett Dow says, what do you think will be the different parties' responses to the climate strikes next week?
I think the Conservatives will likely decry it as foreign-funded radicals. I think the Liberals will probably, give some kind of non-committed answer. I think you'll see a lot of NDPers come out for climate strike support. Some NDP offices, I think, are closing down on that day, telling everybody to, we'll be at the climate strike. We're going on strike too. I don't know if all NDP campaigns are doing that. I assume Greens will go. Greens, again, aren't really connected to the labor movement, but I assume Greens will see this as a great opportunity for them. So expect to see a lot of Green and NDP candidates at these things. Liberals and Conservatives, maybe not as likely, although some Liberals in very left-leaning ridings may go as well. I'm not sure. But I don't think you'll see any denouncements other than maybe from the Conservatives and maybe Maxime Bernier in the PPC, who loves to attack children who care about our future.
Stephen Colbert says, final question. Which is the greater Canadian sporting victory? The Raptors winning the NBA championship or Bianca Andreescu winning US Open in tennis?
Whew, that's a good one. I don't know. I mean,
that's the hardest question of the night.
Okay. Bianca gets some points because it's like she represented Canada and she is Canadian and there's that. But then again, the Raptors get points because it's like a team effort, but then they're not, only one of the Raptors was Canadian, I believe, and he didn't really play. I would say it's probably the Raptors for a few reasons. I think Bianca's tournament only lasted 2 weeks. And people really started tuning in when she got to the quarterfinals. And so it was really only for half a week that we went crazy about it. Whereas the Raptors playoffs was that captured the city for the entire 4 rounds. And it only got crazier. And we were watching it on the streets in Kingston. They put up a TV in Market Square so we could watch it. I would say that it's probably the Raptors. And there's nothing against Andreescu. I just feel like it was made to be a bigger moment than what Andreescu did. Although what she did is still one of the greatest moments in Canadian sports history.
Okay, Lovely Pariah says that, do I think that I would ever be on camera hosting? Maybe I will. I'm not sure. I'm on mat leave right now, so washing my hair is a big deal. So maybe when I have my life a little bit more together, I'll appear on camera. But I do appreciate being part of the show just off camera right now. Amy Ames says, speaking of China, what's your take on the situation in Hong Kong? Where do you stand?
I mean, I'm generally, I'm sympathetic to the Hong Kong protesters, but also realize a lot of them are trying to tap into this colonial nostalgia of when we were under British rule. I think it's a complicated scenario, but I generally think that there was a kind of police crackdown and human rights abuse in Hong Kong. But the tricky thing here is this is just short term, because eventually the deal China made, I'm not an expert on this, was only they would respect Hong Kong being a distinct society from mainland China, but only for so long. And we're getting to a point that's almost over. And so, yeah, for now, this issue has died down, but mainland China is going to continue to assert its authority over Hong Kong. That issue is not going away. This is like an interlude that, like, it looks like the protesters have found some success, but I don't know what the long-term solution is, because China, I don't think, is going to recognize an independent Hong Kong. And I don't think that the British or whatever are going to reinvade to take Hong Kong back. So I think that this is an ongoing issue. And I mean, I can't say more than that, because again, I'm really not an expert. I've never, I don't like, I don't want to, but like, that's my concern, that we're really just kicking this can down the road.
Okay, Lisa Hildebrandt says that she's so excited. She just got off the phone with the NDP, and she's going to be attending a nomination meeting on Friday to vote in a central Alberta candidate, which is pretty cool.
Fantastic. Lisa, that's great. Although, Lisa, you know what you should consider is you should consider getting involved. I think, like maybe next time the solution is that you run, and I think that could be great. I think that so many of the people I know that they're so bright and they want to get involved in politics, and I always think, like, they should put two and two together and realize that they would make great candidates. So maybe there's a future candidate in this room listening to this stream right now.
Well, Zachary Galvine mentioned earlier that he is also helping out on our NDP campaign. So,
and one thing I can say, and this isn't, I'm not trying to brag, but I have seen at least a couple of my relatively recent patrons suggest that I've helped them get involved in the NDP and get involved in being politically more aware. And if I could, like, honestly, that made me so happy. That made me so happy to hear that like people were doing that, because, like, we want to make a difference, right? It's like, yeah, we want to have an entertaining show and talk about entertaining and interesting things, but we also want to, like, do something and have an effect on the world. And, like, it's good. Like when the NDP came to Kingston, like, people from the party said they recognize what we were doing here. And then when fans do it, it's fantastic. And there are other people. I don't know if Craig Adolph is here tonight. I don't know if he is, but he helped run he was the campaign manager of one of the Manitoba NDP campaigns and he didn't win in his riding, but they ran a very good result. And there are all sorts of people who are very involved in politics in my fan base, and I'm really happy to see it. Okay.
Ace has joined us again, and they say, I mentioned if Christo was interested in creating a Discord of some sort for his channel. What do you think of that for the future? It would be awesome to have some more Canadian left communities.
One thing I do have right now, and this is to keep it manageable because my channel's already growing quite a bit, is one of my patron tiers is that if you donate $10 a month, I do have a Slack group where I have a chat thing that people can donate there. But that's like, if I was to open up a Discord, it would probably have a different feel. I'm not opposed to it. That would be something to look at. Like, I don't gate my content, but that is something that I offer to some of my patrons. But a more generalized discourse wouldn't be a bad idea. Or maybe I'd start like a Reddit page and people could post links there or something.
People are in support of the Discord on the chat.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll take a look into that.
Okay. Let's see what we have here. Okay, Travis Palmer. Wondering if you think Canada will ever have a one-person, one-vote system instead of our current electoral riding systems. And love from Calgary.
I don't think we'll ever have one person, one vote unless we move to a presidential system where we elect our prime minister / president as distinct from the parliament. Because right now, our prime minister is almost always, they get elected. They win a seat among the 338 seats, and then they're the prime minister. But like Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh and Andrew Scheer and Elizabeth May and everybody else, they're all running for specific seats in addition to leading national campaigns. And so we can never really move to one person, one vote and under our current system. We would need changes. And there's other changes needed too. And one of them is the balance of power between the provinces. And even in a proportional system, the proportional system would likely have to work within each province because PEI, for instance, is guaranteed a minimum amount of representation, even though it's super tiny. That's why PEI gets 4 seats, even though it doesn't have enough population for more than 2. They get a minimum of 4 because that's what they were promised when they joined Confederation. So PEI will always have a minimum of 4 seats, even as, say, the PEI population shrinks in relation to Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, BC, they'll always get that. And moving to a one person, one vote might be in conflict, some would argue, with the existing constitution's position on seats for small provinces like PEI, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, who all get more seats than they're mathematically allotted because of the Constitution.
Okay. John Christian says, when Jagmeet was in Sherbrooke, he says he wants to find a way for Quebecers to sign on to the Constitution. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a great idea. Now, there's a lot of details there. There's a lot of details and pitfalls. But I think it would be great. It's a shame they did not sign on. It's a shame of how that went on the night of the long knives and all of those things. Like the history is all there. It would be great to see. The big detail is like, well, what would it take to get them to sign on? And then also, will other provinces make demands? In the interim, will they try to open up the Constitution? But I do think Jagmeet is right in noting that Quebec not being a signatory is a major issue. It's a major issue.
So we have a lot of great comments. I'm just shifting through them. Lisa says she's already been approached to run, but she thinks she's too aggressive for Alberta.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that, Lisa. I mean, if you don't want to run, of course, like, you don't feel pressured, but consider that they're approaching you for a reason. And so maybe now's not the time, but think about it for the next provincial or federal election, or maybe it's municipal politics. Maybe that's your calling. You know what I mean? Who knows? But consider it. Consider it.
Stephen Colbert says he's in Kingston too, and he helped with Ian Arthur's campaign.
No, I don't know if, Brianna and I both helped with that campaign. I did a lot of phone work on that one. For the federal campaign, I'm mostly doing media for the party. I consider much of what I do on this channel to be NDP work, because a lot of it is covering the NDP, and then also my media work. But no, that's great to see. Yeah, no, Ian's a great MPP, and Barrington will be just as good if we're going to try to get him elected. I think he's going to be fantastic.
Okay, Brett Dow says, do you think the system that they use in New Zealand would be something to look at?
Do they use MP? I'm not exactly sure which one they use, but I know they use a kind of proportional system or a hybrid. It would certainly be better than ours. Yes, it would be. It would be better than ours. Details would have to be explored about how to apply it to a big, geographically diverse country like ours, but I would certainly consider it.
Okay, Zachary Galvine says, Christo, do you think that we should have required Indigenous representation in Parliament like New Zealand?
I mean, I would say that I don't know how you would do it, but my inkling is that we should. I would need to think a lot more on how you do it, how much there is, how they are selected, all of that. And I would need to consult with Indigenous people, and I haven't done enough here. Some people have suggested you want to reform the Senate, you make the Senate Indigenous. And effectively that gives Indigenous people veto power over legislation. I don't know if that would work. Again, I don't know how that would work. There's a whole bunch of issues, but I do feel that if we want a real change, that meaningful, durable representation for Indigenous people is a good idea. I don't know. And I don't know what Indigenous people want, right? Like, that's a thing too, right? Like, I don't know I'm sure that some Indigenous people want that, but I don't know like what the consensus is for Indigenous people on the sort of representation they want. Like, I'm not sure. I need to do a lot more on it. But my gut feeling is that we should have something.
Travis Palmer says, any interest in meeting with other left-wing influencers like Kyle Kolninsky or David Pakman?
I'd certainly speak with those guys. Haven't yet. I'm not really in touch with them like I am with some other people. I've been in touch with Mike from the Humanist Report. He's used a clip from some of my channels. Peter Coffin has cited some of my work in his videos. So I've definitely, or on their videos, sorry. The reality is that I've done some of this. I haven't really been in touch with those guys. Of course, I'd love to speak with them, but to a certain degree, it's their channels are much larger than mine. And so I don't know if they would have me per se, but yeah, in general, I think they all do great work, and I'd be happy to talk with them, at least in a tentative way. Yeah.
Crispy Critter wants to know, if PEI has seats, why not the First Nations?
Well, I mean, look, the reality is PEI has a guaranteed minimum amount of seats because when they joined Confederation, that was the deal. They got a minimum of 4 seats, no matter what. And so in the future, let's say that it takes 200,000 people to get 1 seat in parliament. PEI will effectively have 4 times the seats it deserves. But that was the deal when the Constitution was made. And unfortunate as it is, the deal when our Constitution was made was that Indigenous people did not get the right to vote unless they relinquished their quote unquote Indian status. And so, that's the reality. We would need to find some sort of constitutional reform to guarantee. But again, this is complicated because Indigenous people, there's literally hundreds of nations, and they do not all believe the same thing in any way, shape, or form. Their political views are extremely diverse. So I don't know how we would build a system that gives Indigenous representation in our parliament and do it in a way that it has the support of Indigenous people. I do not know at this point. And I think that's like a super important question.
Okay, well, there's some conversation going on, but I don't really see any more questions.
Okay. And we have gone for a little bit over 2 hours. That's really good.
So, well, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
It was fun.
So this was great. And again, the turnout here, excepting the one I did after the debate, this is by far the best stream I've done. And this is great. So as you guys know, I do streams every Wednesday night at 8:00. That'll be every week until the election ends. There'll be, I think there's a Wednesday, the election's on Monday, I believe. And then the first Wednesday after, I'll go live. At that point, I'll decide whether to go back to every 2 weeks or to stay weekly. But for at least for the rest of the election, we'll be doing this every Wednesday night. I might do some streams after some debates and things like that. I'll let you guys know if, depending on my schedule and things like that, if I'll be doing them. But every Wednesday for the next few weeks, just you can know that I'll be doing a live stream.
All right, thanks, guys. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a great one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.